Do women really only want tall men? Or is modern dating broken? Let's be honest, this is a question most guys ask when they feel invisible online. Yes, a lot of women do filter for height on dating apps. Yes, that is not bitterness, that is not imagination, that is just the reality. Because filters exist and people use them. And for a lot of men, this means you are ruled out before you are even seen, before you have said the word, before your personality ever even gets a chance. And yes, this can feel rough, this can feel unfair, it can feel like the door is slammed shut immediately. But here is the uncomfortable truth where you all will come for me. It's not actually about women at all. For instance, imagine you say a friendly hello to someone on an app. The person never sees it because the app says you are too short. That stinks, but it isn't personal. That is just how the system is built. Listen clearly here. This isn't really about how attraction works. This is how dating apps work. I say this because in real life, preferences are soft. Someone might genuinely like taller guys, but then they'll meet someone who is funny, who is confident, warm, interesting, and suddenly their interest can change. But the thing is, dating apps do not allow for that to happen. The apps turn the preferences into really hard rules. A nice to have becomes a deal breaker. Not because someone consciously decided. Someone might say, for instance, I would never, under any circumstance, date someone under this so and so height. And this happens on the dating apps because they have the option to do so. They have the option to filter for height. Because the apps make it easy, effortless to filter for height in just one tap. No conversation needed, no context. So what feels like rejection isn't always someone rejecting you. It is often just a system that reduces attraction into numbers and checkboxes. And that distinction actually matters. Because if you're a guy watching me right now and you feel invisible on dating apps, that totally makes sense. Your frustration makes sense. You are not crazy for feeling it. Have you ever wondered why tall guys get a pass even when they mess up? Another thing people bring up in defense of height filters is that taller men get more leniency in dating, more benefit of the doubt, more sexual access, a fewer snap judgments. And that part, that is not just the internet talk. There is real evidence behind it. For decades, psychological research have shown that when people encounter taller people, their brains automatically associate that with dominance, with confidence, with strength, and with leadership. Even when the person has not actually demonstrated those traits yet. The assumption just appears. And this is what psychologists call the halo effect. A tall guy can crack a joke awkwardly, and that can be seen as charming. For a shorter guy, sometimes that same joke can be read as insecure. The thing is, when we notice one positive trait, in this case, the trait being height, our minds unconsciously let that positivity spill over into everything else. Confidence, status, competence, sexual desirability. So, a taller guy often starts off interactions with some kind of invisible buffer. Simply means he gets a little bit more patience. And that doesn't mean he is objectively better. And this just means he is perceived more generously at the first glance. And this doesn't just apply to height. We see these biases all the time. Attractive people are judged as being smarter, more confident, and more successful, even when there is no actual evidence to support those assumptions. So here is a key thing to understand. This whole thing isn't just some moral judgment. This is a cognitive shortcut. This simply means our brains are wired to make fast decisions with limited information. Even though we all know height tells us nothing about a person's character, a person's emotional intelligence, or even how good of a partner they actually are. And this actually leads to a very important distinction that actually gets missed. Short men are not bad partners. They are just judged faster and more superficially. They are judged so quick before their personality can even speak for themselves. That's not fairness, that is bias. These things I'm talking to you about right now, they just don't show up in dating or on dating app. They show up in the real life workplace when it comes to hiring, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to social dynamics everywhere. This is where frustration turns into anger. Because people start noticing this pattern. When a tall man misbehaves badly, it is generally passed off as it's just him or even an individual mistake. But when a shorter guy behaves the same way, suddenly it's not even a behavior anymore. It's turned into a diagnosis. Short man syndrome, Napoleon complex, and that difference matters because those terms do not just describe actions, they pathologize identity. These differences come from a long-standing cultural stereotype that link height to personality and status. This simply means that any assertiveness, any frustration, any confidence from a short guy is translated into insecure in disguise. But here is the part that barely gets mentioned. Psychologists do not treat short man syndrome as a real condition. It's not a diagnosis. This is just a shortcut people use to explain a behavior that is already primed to judge others. What is actually happening underneath is something called heightism. It is a bias where people unconsciously associate physical stature with power, competence, leadership, and confidence. Taller people are more likely to be granted with these traits automatically. And shorter people are more likely to be assumed to lack them, even when there is no evidence. And this stereotype actually works in the real world. This changes how behaviors are translated. A shorter man expressing their frustration might be labeled insecure. A taller man expressing the same frustration will be called decisive. A shorter man asserting himself is considered overcompensating. A taller man doing the same thing is considered alpha. Same behavior, different story. And when you are constantly being judged through that lens, especially for something you can't control, resentment starts to build. Not because someone feels entitled, it's because they feel misread. This isn't some sort of secret conspiracy. It is a cognitive shortcut. And it's reinforced by media, by culture, and decades of storytelling that equates height with authority and success. And here is a very important thing to be clear about. This doesn't mean women are evil. This doesn't mean men are victims. It simply means stereotypes hurt everyone. They flatten people into caricatures and then they erase individuality. And then they just make it harder for anyone, especially men who feel unseen, to be judged on who they actually are. Do men really have fewer standards? Some people say men do not have standards. Let's dig into that. This is a topic that needs to be handled carefully. A lot of men genuinely feel like they are not asking for much. Loyalty, affection, peace, consistency, and a real sense of partnership. To most guys, this doesn't feel like high standard. They feel these are basic. And when these things seem so hard to find, then these men feel like the bar is on the floor. This bar is too low for these things to be missed. And that feeling is legit because wanting stability, emotional safety, and loyalty isn't low emotional standards. It's simply being human. But this is where the nuance matters. Research do show that men have standards. They just tend to express them differently. And sometimes they do not even label these things as standards at all. Across decade studies on partner preferences, both men and women weigh multiple traits when choosing their partners. And they both often emphasize different categories. Men tend to put more weight on physical attractiveness and youthfulness, and women tend to put more weight on social status, financial stability, or access to resources in the long term. This doesn't mean men don't care about emotional closeness, or this doesn't mean that women don't care about physical attraction. This means that both women and men weigh their priorities differently depending on the context. According to research based on some cultures, both men and women tend to frequently have the same traits when it comes to trust, warmth, and reliability, even if in the beginning they rank them differently. But now, dating apps even complicate them more. Study shows that men are more likely to pursue or to swipe on women who are mostly desirable than themselves. And this is not out of arrogance because on these apps, they encourage optimism and low-cost pursuits. So from the outside, it just looks like men have no standards. But in reality, they are holding very specific ones in silence. Okay, here's the most honest way to put it. Men absolutely have standards. They are often just framed differently and sometimes go unspoken. Men will talk about wanting connection, loyalty, and partnership. At the same time, they will prioritize certain attractions that they won't consciously name as standards. On the other hand, women, especially on dating apps, they tend to articulate their preferences more explicitly and they also enforce them more visibly. That doesn't make one side shallow and the other side simple. This just means people signal what they want in different ways. And in a swipe-based environment, that just strips off all the context and then differences get exaggerated. And the whole thing just tends to men want less, women want more. But simply, everybody has standards, but the way it's enforced is different for everyone. And once you understand this, a lot of frustration and resentments becomes more understandable without turning it into blame. Okay, this is the moment where everything clicks. The real reason why this height conversation exists isn't what people assume. It's not that men obsess over height. It's not that women are cruel. It's not that women are evil. It is because modern dating literally rank people based on traits they cannot control. Modern dating systems rank people based on traits they cannot change. Your height, your looks, the shape of your face, or your face symmetry. These traits are backed into the first thing someone sees. Your photo, your profile. That's it. No slow reveal, no conversation, no chance for personality, just a number. So the thing is, when dating is reduced to swiping and instant judgments, it will naturally turn into a hierarchy. People start comparing themselves to others, and they start hyper focusing on metrics that feels unfair and unchangeable. Recent study looking into dating apps behavior found that the raw visual impressions dominate swiping decisions, even more than biography, intelligence, and height. Both men and women unconsciously weigh it first. It's like running a race where the finish line never moves and the rules never change. That is why men can get obsessed with height. This obsession isn't a sign of emotional deficiency. You don't get a chance to show humor, kindness, warmth. You just get judged instantly. And when this happens, an emotional reaction is just human. Subscribe if you're a man who feels invisible on these dating apps because of the traits you have you cannot change. Your frustration is real. You are not overreacting. You are not being dramatic. Being judged before you even say hello hurts. And if you're a woman with preferences, including height, that doesn't make you shallow. People are allowed to want what they want. Don't forget to subscribe.